Hi everyone, so welcome to this session on B Corps. Thank you all for joining us today. We're really pleased to have you here to learn more about B Corps, especially for those of you that aren't aware, March is B Corp month, so we thought it'd be a great opportunity to use that sort of momentum around the B Corp movement to produce this webinar today. Next slide, please. So firstly, we wanted to give you a bit of background about the B Corp team and sort of what we're trying to do with today's webinar. So we have a team of solicitors across departments within VWV that are passionate about and also have experience of advising certified B Corps and organisations that are looking to start their B Corp journey. So we have solicitors with experience of advising sort of charities, social enterprises, corporate, as well as employment. So we have that real breadth of experience in the team. Next slide, please. In terms of today, the main aim is to sort of give you an overview of B Corps more generally, the movement across the world and in the UK, and a bit more detail about the B Corp movement generally. We appreciate that there might be a significant range of the level of knowledge in the virtual room. So we may have some people that are already working within organisations that are certified B Corps, but we may also have some people who are just starting to learn more about the B Corp movement and start their journey. So hopefully we can sort of meet you all where you're at today and give you all a bit of information that will be helpful. In terms of what we'll cover today, as you can see on the slide there, so we'll cover a bit more about what a B Corp is, the certification process, the new standards that are looking to come into force next year, any key considerations for B Corps, and finally how we can assist you. As we said, this is more of an introductory session, so we won't be answering any questions live in the webinar. What we're hoping to do is to collate all of your questions and produce an FAQs document just to sort of give you a breadth of the key questions and the answers that we think will be helpful for you. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. If you have any specific questions about your organisation that you'd like help with, feel free to contact either of the three of us and we should be able to help you. Next slide, please. So the first thing to cover probably is what a B Corp is. And we have a quick poll here just to try and gauge the understanding in the room. If you could submit your answers, then we can see where we're all at. Okay, great. So yeah, a lot of you are already aware, some of you not so much, and that's great. Hopefully we can give you all a bit of background information. So a B Corp is a for-profit company that's recognised and certified as meeting high standards of social and environmental performance, but also public transparency in its supply chain and its use of materials, as well as employee benefits, charitable giving, and legal accountability. So importantly, B Corporation is not a type of legal entity in itself. So most B Corps will be registered companies or another form of entity. Rather, B Corp certification is a level of certification that a business can achieve, and it's for organisations who do adhere to the values of the B Corp movement. There are clear priorities for B Corps, which is generally around doing their business to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. And we'll come on a bit more about that shortly. So a B Corporation will usually have both a mission or a purpose and a profit motive. And importantly, it seeks to balance both the need to make profit and also to meet that motive. It's more of a holistic approach to doing business and seeks to balance that need to make profit. And importantly, a B Corporation is a for-profit organisation. So in terms of who can be a B Corp, as we said, the main thing is that you are a for-profit company. So the starting point is to have at least 12 months of operations in a competitive market. And the key thing is that non-profit organisations or charities can't become a B Corp. And we'll come on more later in the webinar to discuss that. Next slide, please. We thought it'd be helpful to give you a bit of a background to the B Corp movement. So this really started in America in around 2006, the B Corp movement. The B in B Corporation refers to beneficial. And so the movement really started with organisations looking to make a change to the usual way of doing business, to do business more beneficially to people and the planet, and to harness businesses as a force for good. B Lab you'll see referred to quite a lot. So B Lab is the not-profit network leading the movement, so working to transform the global economy and the way business is done. So B Lab itself is the organisation in each country that deals with the certification of new B Corps. There are B Labs across the world, as you can see with the little flags on the map there. So we have B Labs across the globe, forming the global network. So we have some in Australia, East Africa, mainland Europe, North and South America. And this is a unified group of global, regional and national organisations powering the B Corp movement at a local level. As you can see from those figures there, it's an incredibly fast-growing network. So there are now over 6,000 certified B Corps across the world in 159 industries, over 89 countries. And that's gained a lot of traction in the UK more recently, which we'll come on to later. That's a bit of background to the B Corp movement. We wanted to look then really at the motivation behind the movement. And that can be seen really in the global theory of change. And we've given you a link to the B Corporation website there. As you get these slides, you feel free to have a look at that later and find more information. So the aim is really to redefine the role of business so that every business is a force for good, and to try and transform the economic system in a more inclusive, equitable and regenerative global economy. And it's important that any organisation that's wanting to certify as a B Corp understands those aims and sort of holds those aims within its organisation. As the B Corp movement started, it identified certain issues with the way business is currently run. So as you can see there, the current economic system, which is driven by business, is failing to meet its potential and is also creating negative impacts for people, communities and the planet. So that's things kind of like structural and social economic inequality, environmental degradation and resource extraction, and also a decline generally of individual well-being across society. And the aim of the B Corp movement is trying to sort of change the way business is done, to try and address those issues and move all businesses to start playing more of a positive role in the global business economy. Sort of catalyse policy change and develop a network of businesses that all want to work in the same way. And B Corps themselves are leaders in this shift, in the way that B Corps are certified and modelled through the B Impact Assessment, which we'll come on to later, and in their ongoing governance. They really hold this idea of doing business better at their core. Slide, please. So that's sort of the motivation behind the movement. It's also important to pay attention to the real purpose and to understand that if you're looking to become a B Corp or continue to be certified as a B Corp. Unlike other certifications for businesses, the B Lab certification is unique in its ability to measure a company's entire social and environmental impact. So it's designed that a business is meeting its high standards of verification, performance, accountability and transparency throughout its organisation. So its culture as well as the way it's doing business outside. And we'll see a bit later in the webinar how the culture of a B Corp is just as important as the way it's doing business. So it's more around a holistic approach to looking at a business as a whole rather than just certain siloed areas of a business. The motivation for the B Corp movement is also clear in the Declaration of Interdependence that all B Corps have to sign up to in order to complete the certification process. And again, we've provided a link for that there. So that's around conducting business as if people and place matter, being the change that you seek, not harming and benefiting all, and the idea that B Corps are all dependent on each other. So once certified, a B Corp then has a legal requirement to consider the impact of its decisions on workers, communities and customers and sort of encompass that Declaration of Interdependence. That's more about the movement sort of generally. We wanted to look then more specifically at the B Corp movement in the UK. So as you can see there, we've got over 1,100 B Corps across 58 industries and with over 50,000 employees within the B Corp movement in the UK, which is actually a really great statistic. It shows that the UK is sort of really growing that movement very quickly and is sort of understanding the real power of the B Corp movement. B Corp UK is the established charity that was created in 2015 with the mission to inspire and enable people to use business as a force for good here in the UK, so joining the global network of B Labs. And it's this charity, B Lab UK, and you'll see that logo there quite a lot in the B Corp movement. And it's this charity that deals with the certification of any B Corps in the UK. In addition to the B Lab UK in the UK, once you're certified, you can join a local network. So there are 12 local networks within the UK, depending on the region you operate in. And that's a really great resource to be able to contact other B Corps that are already certified and already working in your local region and sort of harness that information sharing within the community. As well as that, there's the Beehive, which you get access to. And again, that's an electronic resource that you can use to get support and advice. As I said, it's growing in momentum in the UK, especially as it's B Corp month this month. You may have seen in shops like Waitrose and WH Smith's end of aisle sections showing exclusively B Corp owned companies. And that just shows that people are really starting to see a shift in work, moving more towards working with B Corps. Please. So we also wanted to touch on the Better Business Act, because this is really linked heavily with the B Corp movement in the UK. For those of you that's not heard of this before, we've provided a link there to find out more information. But essentially, this is a coalition of over 1,900 businesses in the UK campaigning to make a change to company law. The BLAB website states that 72% of the UK public think businesses should have a legal responsibility to the planet and to people. And this is essentially what the Better Business Act movement is all about. The issue this campaign seeks to address is the provisions within company law and the wider implications on directors. So the specific section essentially requires directors to put profit before people and planet, which puts future generations at risk. And the proposed amendments that the Better Business Act Coalition are seeking to make is to change the way that directors consider their decisions and exercise their purposes to benefit the company members, but also to balance that with the benefit to the wider society and the environment. So it's enabling directors to, yes, think about the benefit to its members, but also balance that with their wider impact on the community as a whole, which links really with what B Corps are trying to do. So there are 4 key aims to this movement. The first is to align the business interests by setting out this new duty in the legislation so that the interests of members are balanced with the wider interests of society and the environment. The second thing is that it's important that this change empowers directors to be able to exercise their judgment, weighing up those various factors and sort of make their own decision in the way that best impacts the community as a whole and the company. The third thing is that it's important for this change to apply to all businesses by default. So it's no longer okay for a business to decide not to take these factors into consideration. And the final thing is that following this change, it would be important for businesses to then have to report on how they're balancing all those factors together to make their decisions rather than just benefiting the members. So that will be a really important and key way for UK business as a whole to sort of change its momentum and change its direction and encompass more the B Corp movement. At present, the changes reached their parliamentary reception on the 14th of April 2021, so we're just waiting to see what happens next. And as I say, if you want to find out more information, you can go to that link there and sign up to the coalition if you're interested in that. Next slide, please. So that's more of the background and the movement and the B Corp movement more generally. We wanted to give you some examples just to show you the types of businesses that are B Corps that you may have heard of. I'm sure we've all heard of this sweets brand, Candy Kittens. They were established in 2012 and have been on the journey towards their B Corp status. So they've removed animal gelatin, they refused to use palm oils, they became a fully vegan brand in 2022 and achieved carbon neutral status in 2021. So that really shows that as a food manufacturing company, they're changing the way they do business and they've seen a massive success doing that. So it shows that you can balance that success and profit with these other considerations. They were the first UK sugar confectionery brand to become a B Corp in October 2022. And on their website, they show really clearly their commitment to doing things better for the world, their team and their customers. And they've also said that they recognise that it's not just about getting a certification and then sitting back to relax. It's the start of a new chapter for your business to make impactful plans for the years to come to really continue doing business better. So that's a really great example, I think, of a relatively new and very popular brand that have really adhered to the B Corp movement. Next slide. Looking across the world, another good example is Tom's. I'm sure you've all heard of this footwear and lifestyle brand, and they're really using their business to improve lives. So since 2006, as a brand, its community has impacted lives across the world, supporting non-profit organisations. They really believe in a future where all people have a chance to thrive, and they commit a third of their profits to grassroots goods across the world. So it's clear to see why Tom's would become a B Corp and to strengthen its reach across its business and really continue to be doing good. Tom's has been certified as a B Corp since November 2018. So it's been going for quite a while in the B Corp movement and is often an inspiration for the B Corp movement to how to change your business and do business better. So they have a unique one-for-one business model. So they give away one pair of shoes for every shoe that's bought. and they use that to support things like health, education, and community development across the world. Some would say that Tom's was the original purpose-driven brand in the way that they developed this unique business model. And they use meaningful partnerships and progression across the world to really adhere to the global B Corp brand. Next slide, please. That's a bit of a background, so I'll pass over to Jazz now to carry on.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I'm actually going to kick off by running a poll just to see where you're all at with your B Corp journey. So I'll give that a few minutes. Perfect. So most of you are either here to learn more about it or are interested or currently becoming a B Corp. So I think this session will hopefully be very helpful for you in learning more about what that process entails. So just to start off then, in terms of eligibility, I know Rebecca touched on this earlier, but in order to certify as a B Corp, you must operate for profit in a competitive market and have at least 12 months of operations in place. There isn't a minimum or maximum size requirement, but certain companies might have additional considerations and requirements placed on them. So sole traders are eligible to certify, and they should select 0 for the number of workers when asked that in the B impact assessment. Partnerships are generally eligible to certify, but companies who are large or complex in nature might need to contact B Lab directly to discuss the correct certification approach for them. And these are companies who typically have a revenue of over £1 billion or over 100 million with an added layer of complexity. So if, for example, your business has numerous subsidiaries, operates in various jurisdictions or over multiple industries, then you'll need to contact B Lab to find out more information about your certification approach. If you don't have more than 12 months worth of operations, then you can actually apply to become a pending B Corp. And this is a great way to communicate the mission of your company from really early on and still engage with the B Corp community to put in place that framework for when you are actually eligible to apply. Ellie, next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the process to become certified, I will go into each of these in more detail throughout my slides, but just to give you a rough overview, the first stage is to pass the B impact assessment, or the BIA, and this essentially assesses the impact of your entire company, and you must achieve a verified score of at least 80 points and recertify every 3 years to pass that assessment. You'll then be required to make the legal change. So this is when you amend your articles of association to formally commit to considering the impact of your decision-making on all of your stakeholders. You'll also have to commit to publishing your score online and to producing an annual impact report to demonstrate your progress. You'll also have to pay a submission fee as well as an annual fee, and I'll give you a bit more detail on the fees later on. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the main part of this will be the B impact assessment. And this is essentially a questionnaire with approximately 200 questions that are tailored to your company's size, sector, and location. And it measures each of those 5 areas listed on the screen. So governance, workers, community, environment, and customers, and measures your impact in each of those. There's a 80-point pass rate, which most companies don't actually achieve on the first go and will be required to improve on their score. Once a score does hit 80, however, you'll be asked to complete the disclosure questionnaire and submit your assessment to B Lab for their review. And during this verification process with B Lab, your score could actually change. So we advise to answer the assessment as conservatively as possible and to always submit in excess of 80 points just in case the score decreases once it's verified. Next slide, please. So in terms of transparency, I thought it'd be good here to have an example of a B Corp. So this is Patagonia Works, and this is an American retailer of outdoor clothing. So you can see here, this is published information on the B Lab website, and it shows their score of 151.4, which is actually a really good score. You'll see against the pass rate of 80 and against the median score for average businesses that it's actually doing quite well. But what you can also see is that you can break down each of the sections and the scores in each of the sections for the companies that are listed. And in those, you can compare if a company's just doing really well in one sector and that's what's bringing their score up. You can also see their previous impact scores to see whether there's an improvement year on year. And this is a really good way of seeing how open you have to be about your scoring on the B Lab website and have that consideration in mind of transparency when making the application, just to know that you are making that commitment to have your scores published year on year and to deal with the annual reporting obligations. Next slide, please. So the second part of this is the legal requirement. So this is where your business will be required to adopt specific wording into your articles of association to reflect a commitment to create a material positive impact on society and the environment, and to also consider the impact of your decision making on all of your stakeholders. So those listed on the slide here. Once you've amended the articles, these will need to be filed with Companies House, and this will essentially serve to protect your company's mission whilst empowering your directors to consider wider stakeholder issues and make mission-aligned decisions over time. If you're at this stage and you need help with amending your articles, or if you want to consider a redraft of your articles because they're no longer fit for purpose generally, then this is certainly something we can help you with, and please do get in touch with us if you need any further advice on that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the B Lab process, I just wanted to put this slide up just to illustrate that it's not an overnight thing. It does take time. You can see from the timeline here that each of the stages can range from anywhere between 1 to 7 months. So just to be conscious of this and factor in any internal resourcing when preparing for an application, because it is considered a bit of a long-term project, especially with recertification every 3 years. So it's just something to bear in mind. This is a typical timeline for an average size company with less than 250 employees and less than 100 million worth of turnover. So it should apply to most, but it gives you a very good indication of how long each stage will take. So I'll go into a bit more detail as to each stage and what that entails. So starting with the evaluation queue, this is where the B Lab evaluation team will review your B impact assessment and allocate resource to your application. And there's not really much for you to do during this time, but as you can see, it can be a pretty long wait. So it's always just worth factoring that in. The evaluation stage next is a pre-screening stage where B Lab will determine your company's eligibility for certification. Your application will be screened and request for documentation will be put forward. You'll then move on to the verification queue where you will complete the documentation request, wait for B Lab to assign an analyst who will then verify your information that you provided. During the verification stage, B Lab will review the responses that you provided to the assessment, as well as any documentary evidence that you've submitted afterwards. And they will also hold a review call with you to run through those responses. If your score falls below 80 points, you'll be asked to make improvements. And whilst the timeline here suggests 3 months, depending on what those improvements are, they could obviously take longer. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Post-verification, you will have access to the B Corp community and all of the resources that come with that. Next slide, please. Once you have become a B Corp, obviously the journey doesn't end there. You'll be asked to sign the B Corp agreement and you'll be able to use the B Corp logo on all of your branding. You'll be able to attend community events and working groups and really take advantage of those resources that are available to you. In order to maintain this certification, you need to recertify every 3 years and achieve the score of 80 points. And you'll also be required to publish your annual impact report to share your progress and goals. You'll also have to pay a one-off submission fee, which is £250 plus VAT. And you'll then have to pay an annual fee, which is calculated based on your company's turnover from the last set of annual accounts. Next slide, please. I've just put this slide together to show you the certification fees depending on the size of the business. So it can range obviously from £1,000 up to £50,000, and any companies with over £1 billion worth of turnover would need to contact B Lab directly for pricing information on that. but it just gives you an indication of the sliding scale, and you can see kind of where your business would fit in within that. Pending B Corps will have to pay a one-off fee of £500, which covers that 12-year period. And there are also discounts available of up to 40% on certification fees for underrepresented business owners for the first 3 years. So this is really to target UK-based entrepreneurs who face systematic barriers to business ownership, and they'll be eligible to apply for that 40% discount. Next slide, please. Perfect. So I will now pass on to my colleague Sinead, who will run through the new standards and other information with you.
Thank you, Jazz. Yeah, so we're now just going to touch on what's on the horizon, including some important proposed changes to the global B Corp standards, which Jazz has mentioned, that underpin the impact assessment. So next slide, please, Ellie. So just to give a little bit of context, as Rebecca has explained, the B Corp community has grown significantly since the movement began in the US in 2006. And this rapid growth has been fantastic and seen the introduction of companies of all sizes and sectors under the B Corp logo. But that said, there have been some concerns amongst the community about multinational or other companies with questionable ethical or environmental practices entering the movement. And just to take a couple of examples from this image on the screen, so Nespresso, the coffee brand, has recently been certified as a B Corp, and that recent certification has met criticism due to some concerns about its treatment of farmers and workers in its supply chain, and also it being a wholly owned subsidiary of Nestle. We also have Brewdog, which recently had its B Corp certification revoked following some high-profile allegations of workplace bullying and a workplace culture of fear. Now, this is not to undermine the fact that these names have legitimately passed B Lab's certification process and have demonstrated compliance with the current standards. And it's also worth noting that these controversial cases represent a small minority of those certified B Corps, which are by and large fully committed to the movement. However, this scrutiny is certainly on B Lab's agenda and is driving its wider plans to strengthen the standards for becoming a B Corp moving forward. Next slide, please. So just to take a look at what is on that agenda. So with the growth of the B Corp movement and global changes, B Lab has recognized that it must continually evolve its standards for certification. Now, these standards play a core role in defining environmental, social, and governance best practices. And the standards are really at the heart of B Corp certification. So in December 2020, B Lab announced a review of the standards for certification, and they are now proposing a framework based on mandatory performance on certain key topics, which we'll come on to shortly. So next slide, please. So in terms of what is different, as Jazz explained, the current B Corp certification process, companies have flexibility in how they achieve the 80-point score. So while it's essential that companies meet the legal requirement and amend their articles, there's no minimum score requirements that companies need to meet in each category for the current impact assessment. So the current result is that a company could meet a very low score in one category, such as workers or environment, while still meeting the minimum 80-point score for B Corp certification in the other categories combined. Now, the new draft standards propose to change this approach by removing the 80-point minimum score entirely, and by instead identifying 10 specific topics which are non-negotiable and essential to becoming a certified B Corp. So the result of this proposal is that B Corps will not be able to thrive in one area of impact while falling behind in another, and this should tighten the entry and compliance requirements for B Corp certification moving forward. So just moving on to the next slide, please. So I just put this slide up just to show you those differences between the current performance requirements against the new proposed performance requirements, which I've mentioned. So just to recap, currently companies have to achieve a verified 80-point score and to have flexibility in how to achieve that score across the 5 categories, which Jazz has mentioned. And then at recertification, companies need to, again, have achieved the verified 80-point score across those categories. Now, for the new standards, companies will need to meet specific requirements on 10 topics on this wheel on the screen, which you might not see, but we'll come on to shortly. And each topic will be verified for certification. At recertification, companies then need to demonstrate ongoing compliance with these requirements and also to progress on impact management goals. So just moving on to the next slide. So this following slide sets out a list of those 10 draft new topics for mandatory performance. So you can see there is some overlap with the current categories that Jazz mentioned, such as environment with climate action and stewardship. However, there are some new topics listed, such as human rights. And this topic is not just concerned with protecting human rights on a customer and workers level, but also throughout the company's supply chain. Now, each of these topics has its own outcomes and specific requirements and measurements. And the proposed standards set out those specific requirements. Those standards are very long, they're 90 pages, but we can share a link with you with these slides. But just for the purposes of today, instead of running through each of these topics one by one, we have decided to pick 3 particularly robust topics from the list and to explain the requirements underpinning those topics. So just moving on to the next slide. So just to take 3 topics in turn. The first topic here is purpose and stakeholder governance. And then you can see on the right-hand side, I've just listed some of a summary of the key requirements falling under this topic. So the new proposed requirements say that companies wishing to certify as a B Corp must have a defined purpose statement that contributes to a material positive impact on society and the environment, and that purpose statement must be incorporated into the organization's strategy. Companies will also be required to ensure that the highest level of governance in the company must have explicit oversight and monitoring implementation of that purpose. So this in particular might require a review of the company's governance handbook, policies around delegation to ensure that this requirement is complied with. Moving on to impact management. So again, the company's highest governance body must commit to improvement goals on other material topics not covered by the core topics, which I'll mention shortly, and to also have a management system in place to maintain ongoing compliance with the standards. So again, it's really important for the companies to consider resourcing of putting all of these mechanisms and requirements in place because it can involve quite a lot of governance time and internal resource. So moving on to risk standards, the new proposed standards state that companies wishing to certify as a B Corp must transparently share information with B Lab regarding sensitive or controversial practices or stakeholder concerns, and must also pass a review with B Lab, which might require public disclosure of those concerns. So this requirement in particular is particularly interesting as it shows that B Lab is assuming a tighter oversight role over incidents or concerns, which might compromise the B Corp brand. Companies must also have sufficient mechanisms in place to respond to and remedy grievances from stakeholders. They must not materially misrepresent information to B Lab or the public. and their campaigning and lobbying policies must also not compromise the the B Corp movement. So again, all these new proposed risk standards are far more robust and demonstrate that B Lab is becoming a more active certification and compliance body moving forward. So moving on to the next slide. So just to flag for completeness briefly that the draft new standards include both core 10 topics and requirements, which we've covered. And if that wasn't enough, there are also other topics which B Corp companies must assess and set goals to improve upon, which are on the right-hand side. And there are no minimum performance expectations for these other topics on the right, but they will form part of the new B Lab impact assessment. So it's just important for those in the room who are, you know, in the process of becoming a B Corp or looking to become a B Corp to just bear these topics in mind. So this category will include questions on the company's governing body, workers' benefits, health and safety, and even charitable giving. So it's quite interesting that B Lab has recognised that the core topics aren't necessarily enough, and there might be other topics that will be relevant for B Corp certification. Next slide, please. So just in terms of next steps, we understand that B Lab has completed its consultation with B Corps and the public on the draft new proposed standards. We're on version 7 of the standards, and whether further changes will be made to the draft remains to be seen. B Lab has noted that the standards are expected for phased implementation in early 2024. And they've also noted that B Corps and those in the process of certification, like those in the room, will have at least one full certification term to prepare. So there should be ample time to prepare and implement these requirements. Next slide, please. So that's it in terms of the new proposed standards. Of course, more generally, if you would like to start your B Corp certification journey, we would be more than happy to help guide you through that process and assist with the legal requirement and any policies, governance, employee handbooks that you might require, or even advice on preparing for the upcoming draft standards.